Hi everybody, Dominique Calvillo here. I'm the designer and owner of Namaste and Crochet. Since I started my brand 5 years ago, I've been able to work with international brides and celebrities. I have participated in New York and LA Fashion Week, and I've been featured in publications such as Harper's BAZARR, Brides Magazine, and Vogue. So I guess it's going pretty well. Something that has been absolutely essential for me in creating the success of my brand is telling the story of my brand and my products through captivating visuals. And I firmly believe that this process does not need to be complicated, and you don't need a team or professional photographers or models to achieve really great visuals that make you sales. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you and share a little bit more about how I have created a visual world around my brand and hopefully help and inspire you to do the same. To give you a little bit more about my backstory, I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I come from a very musical and artistic family, so I was basically raised in the entertainment industry. When I was 17 years old, I signed to Interscope Records, a record deal, and spent just a ton of time in front of the camera and on productions. This experience kind of led me to starting a styling business. So for the past 10-ish years, I have worked as a makeup and hair artist, a wardrobe stylist, and an art director on commercials and films for other brands. I've worked with brands such as Starbucks, Citibank, Girl Scouts, Google, and a bunch of fashion brands. So I've been able to see how these big companies set up their visuals and tell a story in a way that will make them sales. Because I've had all of these experiences on big productions, I have been able to take all of this information and apply it to my own brand. So today I'm really going to share all of my tips and tricks with you, and also to tell you that you don't need a huge crew, you don't need professional models, you don't need a professional photographer in order to get really beautiful content that will make you sales. So thank God for that. I'm gonna tell you everything that I do just using my iPhone, that honestly, the iPhone photo makes a lot of sales. So let's dive in. Okay, so you're gonna hear me throwing out the word brand quite a lot through this course, and a lot of people are confused about this word and what it means, so I'm just gonna quickly break it down. Your brand is everything outside of your product that kind of tells the story of your product, what you're selling, and who you are. So this is everything from like the colors that you use on your website, it's the emojis that you use in your captions, it's the tone of your voice that you write your captions with, and then it's kind of the overarching sentiment of what you're trying to sell. So my brand is very diversity centered, very mindfulness centered. I started crocheting as a form of art therapy. So a lot of my messaging is around being mindful, taking time for yourself to kind of meditate with your craft and to just enjoy the moment. If you're wearing a garment of mine, my overarching theme is enjoying the moment, feeling fabulous in your own skin, embracing your own natural beauty. So everything that I'm kind of creating around my products is telling that story and sharing that message. So for you, think about what you're trying to say, even outside of your product, and think about just kind of the overtone and the theme of the messages that you're trying to convey. And then just make sure that everything kind of points to that. Your captions should point to that. The emojis that you use should point to that. So yeah, just keep those things in mind, and that's what really creates a brand identity. You might be thinking, what is my visual identity? How do I even figure this out? And don't worry, I got you. There's a really easy trick that I like to use to kind of get myself in a creative flow when I'm like having an identity crisis visually. And all that I do is go on Pinterest and just create a board. I'll usually call it like my brand, or whatever it is that I'm searching. And I'll just go through Pinterest and pin a bunch of things. Pin things that have to do with your brand, pin things that don't, pin product photography, pin fashion photography, and just kind of see what you end up gravitating toward. Usually you can kind of identify some patterns once you've gone through and pinned a lot of things. Like maybe you'll notice like, oh, I really like moody editing. Maybe I really like minimal composition where there's not much in the frame except for the product and like a plant or, you know, whatever it is. But you'll start to see consistencies in the things that you gravitate toward. When I go and pin things, I'm pinning like vacation locations, I'm pinning, you know, other fashion brands, I'm pinning, you know, just architecture, anything that kind of inspires me and gets my creative juices flowing, that is going to kind of help me create an entire world around what it is that I'm trying to communicate. And then from there, it's very easy to kind of be like, all right, well, here's the template, here is the goal of what we're going for, and then just start to make content that kind of visually matches that and matches the overall tone of what I'm trying to communicate with my brand. My brand is very diversity centered, very inclusive. Beyond that, I really like to showcase natural settings. I really like natural hair and makeup. And the overall tone of my brand is about being in the moment and really enjoying like Mother Earth. So a lot of my visuals kind of point toward that overall idea. I shoot a lot of photos outside, I use natural looking models, and I kind of keep hair and makeup minimal. And I found all of this out because I did this research on Pinterest and just kind of created a visual world for myself where I could understand my own style and what I gravitate towards. So I highly encourage you to do the same. Get on Pinterest and start pinning a bunch of things that you love and see what looks consistent and what points to your brand. Okay, so there are 4 different types of photos that I want you to think about when building your visual world for your brand. The first one is e-com. The second one is flat lays. Third one is lifestyle. And the fourth one is editorial or fashion editorial. So I'm gonna break each one of them down for you right now. The first type of photo we're gonna talk about is e-com or e-commerce. These types of photos are absolutely essential if you're trying to sell online. You've seen these all the time. Every fashion brand uses them. And it's basically just a model or the product up against a very simple backdrop. And you want to take 4 to 5 different angles of the product. And what this does is really tell the customer exactly what the product is. That way there's no question when they go to purchase. Very important. The second type of photo that I want to focus on is flat lays. Flat lays are basically getting a bird's eye view of the product from above or from the side or however you like to do it, but it's really showing detail off of the body or just as a still life, and using things like relevant items, accessories, or like florals if that's going to add to the vibe, or just creating texture. They're really important. They're really great at telling a story, and it's a great way to show detail and just create more of a vibe. The third type of photo we're going to talk about is lifestyle. So lifestyle is showing your product in an everyday life situation. Maybe if you're selling a scarf, you're wearing the scarf while you're making a cup of coffee, or if it's a beanie, maybe you're wearing a beanie while you're taking a hike. And it's basically showing how your product applies to people's everyday lives so that they can kind of envision having their product in their daily life. The fourth type of photo that I want to talk about that is personally my favorite kind of photo is editorial or fashion editorial. And editorial kind of gets thrown around a lot. People use it to mean a lot of different kinds of things. But the way that I like to think about it is creating an entire visual world around your product. So think about where you would ideally like your product to be seen or used and kind of build your world from there. For example, I sell a lot of wedding dresses. So I like to take pictures of my wedding dresses on models that could be bridal, and then in places where a wedding could potentially happen, or in really beautiful natural settings. And that kind of sets the tone for my product in that environment. You might be thinking right now, well, what's the difference between lifestyle and editorial? And the way that I want you to think about it is lifestyle is showing your product in the world, and then editorial is creating the world around your product. So when you go to shoot editorial, think of the story of your product, and then think of the most ideal place that you would like to use your product. Think about the people that will be using your product. Who's your ideal customer? Are they festival goers? Are they brides? Are they mothers that are home? Think about these your ideal customer, where they like to hang out, and what their dream scenario would be to use your product. Now that we've talked about the 4 different kinds of photography, I want to talk about the different elements in a photo. And if we get all these elements to harmonize, that's what's going to create beautiful images that will absolutely make us sales. And that's what we want, right? Yes. Amen. Love it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is styling the product. And I'm going to use myself as an example. I sell a lot of garments and a lot of dresses, so I'm working with a lot of models. And I'm just gonna take a little tangent to do a little TED Talk about selecting models, if that's cool. So I know what it's like to work with like top agency models, but I also know what it's like to try to drag your sister or your cousin or your, neighbor girl into shooting photos with you. So you gotta use what you have. However, I will say, if you are in a position where you are choosing models and you're choosing different kinds of beauty and different types of people to represent your brand, I think it's really important that anybody in that position, especially now, is very considerate about thinking outside of the box of what we would consider the beauty norm in order to do that. I think that, society definitely has it in their heads that there's only this certain type of beauty, and it's just not true. And I think it's really important that if you're in a position where you're choosing a model, you're choosing who's going to be seen, that we think outside of the box and that we choose people that resonate with our clients. Think about who your ideal customer is and, what they look like, and choosing people that they will look at and be able to see themselves in that person and resonate with that person. So TED Talk over, but yes, please, think outside of the box and make sure that you're representing different kinds of beauty and being diverse in your selections of your models. You choose your model, and then from there you style the garment on the model, right? So everything from like hair and makeup, accessories, shoes, any other garments that I'm going to be using with the garment that I'm trying to sell. All of these things need to point to the garment, but not distract. We don't want anything else to steal the show. So think about your branding and, think about the types of accessories and different types of things that could go with your brand and complement your brand, but not take away. For example, I like to use little pieces of gold jewelry that aren't too big, but just kind of little sparkles. I like to use pretty natural hair and makeup. Of course, every now and then I like to kick up the glam. But for the most part, I like to keep things pretty natural. That way, when people come to my page and they see these girls, they're not seeing people that look like, the Kardashian level of like glam all the time. They're seeing people that look probably closer to something that they would wear every day. So think of all these things, consider all these things. If you're selling to people that, go to festivals, maybe throw in some festival type of hair and accessories. If you're selling to, mothers, maybe take into consideration what they would practically be wearing throughout their day. So just think about all of these things and just make sure that everything that you're shooting and that's on your model or in your scene is going to point and complement your product and not distract. Okay, the second thing that we're going to talk about is lighting. Lighting is so important. There are so many different kinds of ways to play with lighting, and you really want to explore this for your own brand and figure out kind of the different lighting that you like to use. Do you like to use more moody? Are you more natural? And just think about these kinds of things so that you can play with it. But what I will say for sure for everybody is that your product needs to be well lit. I can't tell you how many times people send me photos of themselves up against a window and the light source is coming from behind them. So there's this like glow around them. So you just really want to make sure that the model, or if it's you taking a photo, that you want to be facing toward the light. You don't want the light to be coming from this way or directly above. Something to consider when you are shooting outside is to not have harsh shadows on the face or on the body or whatever it is that you're shooting. You really want to make sure that you're not getting these like crazy shadows. So that happens all the time, right? Something that I really like to do if it's a sunny day out, but I really need to get a photo and I'm getting some crazy shadows, is take a picture in a doorway, because a doorway is going to have the most amount of natural light coming toward you while having a simple background with no shadows. So that's something to consider. Of course, it's fun to play with shadows sometimes, and if you are doing that intentionally, that's awesome. This is all up to artistic interpretation, of course, but you just really want to make sure that your product is very well lit and that it can be clearly seen. And if you're using a model, it's best not to have shadows on the face. Another great way to do this is to find just shaded areas outdoors where the person in the frame will be completely shaded so that there's no shadows, but that you're still gonna get a ton of natural light. Definitely one of my favorite tricks. Okay, so the third thing that we're gonna talk about is composition. And this is basically just framing the photo, framing your garment or whatever your product in the photo so that it can be clearly seen and that so that everything in the frame is complementing and not taking away from your product. Have I said that enough? I don't think so. So this has to do with a few things. I'm gonna start with like posing and making sure that you're taking a photo of the entire garment. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten photos of like sweaters where like an arm is cut off, or you know, they're doing a pose and like a body part is missing or part of the garment is missing. So you really want to make sure that you're getting like the full garment in the photo, of course, unless you're photographing like detail or something like that, but just really make sure that like no arms are missing, no appendages are lost. And also you want to consider posing. So a lot of times I see people do the same thing, especially if they're modeling garments where they're taking a photo from way up here, right? We've all kind of done that. It's like the MySpace thing where you're kind of like looking up at the camera. But I have come to find, especially when photographing products, that kind of makes the view look like you're looking down on the person or down on the product. Whereas shooting from below and shooting kind of up at the model or up at the product will make it look more powerful, and it'll kind of give it this like stronger position and angle on the camera. So that's just something to consider. So posing, making sure that the entire person is in frame, and then you want to consider things that are in the background. I can't tell you how many times I have photoshopped, you know, soccer balls or bikes out of the backdrop of like a beautiful gown. So if you're shooting like, you know, a nice crochet piece, you just want to make sure that everything in the frame is going to be a complement to that. And, you know, take out any random little items that don't need to be there, and just make sure that, you know, again, everything in frame is pointing toward the story of your product and not taking away from it. All right, so the last element that we're going to talk about is location, location, location. And this is just setting up your garment, your product, whatever it is, to be in its setting. You want everything to look natural. And this is a really great time to really explore who you are and tell the story of your brand. Like, I live in California, I live close to the beach, close to the mountains, so I really like to shoot in places like that because that kind of tells a story of who I am and my lifestyle. But think about yourself and your branding. What are you selling and where are these things worn? Do you live close to like a beautiful forest? Is there a lot of nature where you live? Do you live close to like a beautiful farm? Think about places where you and your brand are kind of made and the world that you live in, and apply those things to your brand. Another great thing to take into consideration is that you don't need a huge, perfect location to take a great photo. All the time, I love to look for little walls. Like if you find like a fully shaded wall that's got a nice texture on it, beautiful, grab that. If it's got a plant there, perfect. Sometimes I like to find beautiful shaded trees that are just, you know, simple foliage in the background that, you know, would complement a garment and not distract from it, but still kind of put it in a scene. If you want to shoot your things in like a cityscape, if you're more of like an urban brand, you can find like really cool, simple places, like maybe it's a doorway, maybe somebody's coming out of an apartment. And just grab like these little like nooks and crannies in life that maybe you don't think about as like a location, but you know, if you're just thinking of like the frame of one photo, you don't need a huge, perfect location. You just need a little spot where you can highlight your piece and take a great photo of it. All right, guys, so we're gonna talk about one more really important element, and that is editing. Yay! Editing is definitely a personal choice, and it absolutely is kind of up to you and the mood of your brand. Similar to how I was talking about setting up a mood board for yourself to kind of gain your brand identity, this is a great place to kind of implement that. So editing does not need to be difficult. There are tons of really simple editing tools. I like to use Visco or VSCO. There's things like Lightroom, and there's even a really great editing tool on the actual iPhone that you can use. So, you know, again, you don't need all this fancy equipment. You don't need Photoshop, although it is nice to have. And you really just want to make sure that the editing in your photos is generally consistent, and people do it different ways. Like I know people that they have the same filter on their photo every single time, and if you look at their page, it's going to be like perfectly flawless the same. The way that I like to do it is edit each photo and stick to kind of the general color palette that I usually stick to. I like to use a lot of jewel tones. I like things to be pretty contrasty, but then I like a lot of natural light, and for things to look pretty similar to how they would look if you were looking at them with your naked eye. So editing is a really great way to like make something pop, make something to stand out. And if you were thinking editing is cheating, it's absolutely not cheating. You're already taking a photo on a device, taking it out of the natural world. So it's totally fine to kind of put your spin on what that visual would be. So yeah, take a look at your mood board and you'll notice like the consistent things that you end up choosing and selecting, and you'll kind of see the visual styling that you gravitate toward. Another thing to consider is filters. We're all using filters every now and then. Filters are a huge thing. You can buy presets to filters so that you just have consistent filters. That's all great. I do recommend though, being careful when you're using filters, especially if you're advertising a product. You don't want to change the colors too much. You still want it to be true to color so that a customer can look at the photo and still know what they're gonna get. So you don't wanna use like filters that are gonna take things too far outside of reality, unless of course that's a part of your brand and that you're communicating that with the customer. You just don't want anybody to be blindsided when they see something in person versus what it is in the photo. All right, guys, I hope that your creative juices are flowing and that you feel inspired to create beautiful visuals for your own brands that will make you sales. If you are interested, I have a free download available, my 10 top tricks to iPhone photography. Like I said, I really don't think that you need, a professional photographer or model or camera in order to create beautiful content that will make you sales. So be sure to download that, 10 tricks that I use all the time to create beautiful content just on my phone. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you feel inspired, and please feel free to reach out to me. My handles on Instagram are @DominiqueCalvillo, and then my DIY crochet pattern page is @Namaste and Crochet. So please feel free to stop by, check out my patterns, tell me about your brand and your visuals. I would love to chat. And yeah, until I see you next time, bye.